You fool! Warren is dead.
Welcome to HorrorBabble. I'm back today with a seasonal curiosity, The Other Santa by Thorp McClusky, first published in the March 1949 edition of Weird Tales. It was a nice stunt, this putting Christmas spirit on the radio, dressed up Santa and all. I hope you enjoy this one. The Other Santa by Thorp McClusky. This story really begins weeks ago. One autumn afternoon when two bright boys in a New York advertising agency thought up a super special Christmas Eve radio stunt for one of their clients. The idea was to broadcast a miracle. Not the kind that happened in the Bible, of course, but the next thing to it. Have something unexpected, wonderful, and impossible happen to someone, and put the whole thing on the air. Corny, but effective. The gimmick was simply this. Find a little girl who needed a major operation, but whose parents were too poor to afford it. On Christmas Eve, have Santa Claus come right into her home, give her some presents, and for a punch finish, hand her a great big check, drawn on that bank in Santa Claus, Indiana. The check is signed Santa Claus. It's perfectly good, and obviously it's to pay for the operation. There's a microphone hidden in a vase of flowers on a table right beside the little girl's wheelchair, and a couple of others concealed around the living room. Everything completely extemporaneous. The idea was terrific, all right. Surefire, couldn't miss. More punch than Lionel Barrymore playing Scrooge in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Not even a word of commercial. Just let the public go around asking, "Say, did you hear that program, The Spirit of Christmas, on the radio Christmas Eve? Who put it on anyway? The network or some sponsor smart enough not to plug his product for once?" And, of course, the news would leak out ultimately who'd footed the bills. Get the sweet, beautiful, lovely indirection of it all? Well, we scouted around and found a suitable little girl in a tiny New England village. She was 6, going on 7, pretty as a doll and sweet, really sweet. A year before she'd had a fall and injured her spine. She was paralyzed from the waist down, and only one of those big-shot specialists could fix her up. Her parents were made to order too, both kids in their 20s, presentable, loving each other and their daughter, honest, hard-working, poor as church mice and worried to death. Get the poignancy of the setup? We gave the parents microphone tests, and their voices projected fine. We wouldn't even have to use actors to double for them. In the afternoon of December 25th, we installed and tested the equipment while the little girl was taking her nap. We stuck a portable, soundproof control room in the dining room and cut narrow slits through the living room wall so we could see what was going on in there. There was a little red light behind where the little girl's wheelchair would be, so the parents could tell when they were on the air. We had a record player and telephone connections, and we'd gone to the trouble of having a delivery truck painted bright red with a big, jolly-looking portrait of Santa Claus on the side. You see, Santa Claus would have to drive out from the village, and we wanted the little girl's reaction to be realistic when she got her first glimpse of old Whiskers from the living room window. We even hired Tim Donovan to play the part of Santa. You know Tim, how big he is, and what a magnificent voice he's got, and how he can ad-lib better than any other actor in radio. We went on the air right on the dot, coast to coast, with a recording of Silent Night, Holy Night, fading behind Jim Allen and that butter wouldn't melt in my mouth narrative voice of his. "Good evening all, and a very Merry Christmas to everyone, everywhere," Jim drooled. During the next half hour, blah, blah, blah. A program so unique, so unusual, so heartwarming. Blah, blah, blah. Putting the radio audience wise. It was a prepared introduction, and it was beautiful prose. Abe Lincoln couldn't have written any better. But it made me sick just the same. What difference did it make if we kept the name of the family in the village out of the broadcast? The whole country would find out soon enough. I didn't like any part of what we were doing, except the check we would give the kid. Well, as soon as Alan finished reading, the phone rang, and Santa Claus Donovan announced from the village that he would start in just so many minutes. Then the little red bulb lit up, and we brought in the family, all singing jingle bells as prearranged, very Christmassy and gay. When the song was finished, the father coughed, very nervous, and said, "You're back, Jane. How does it feel?" You could tell the little girl was surprised. She piped right back, "It doesn't hurt at all, Daddy. Why should it? It never hurts much anymore." I grinned all over when she said that. "Well," the father persisted, forcing the point as per instructions, "I just wondered if it might be hurting." Then he switched hurriedly to, I wouldn't be surprised, Jane, if Santa Claus will be along any minute now." Jane was skeptical. "Why are you so sure I'll see Santa Claus this year, Daddy?" she wanted to know. "Every other year you always said he wouldn't come until after I was asleep." The father started to muff that one, but the mother jumped right in with the gentle assurance. "This year, Jane, Santa is making his rounds in a big, shiny new red automobile. He can travel a lot faster than by reindeer, so he'll be around much earlier. Trust a woman to think faster than a man in a pinch every time." Well, the family chatter went on for a minute or so longer. Then Jim Allen cut in again, pompous as usual. "Santa Claus, driving the big red delivery truck, has now left the village and is on his way to Jane's house. In just 30 seconds, Jane will see him coming over the crest of the hill." And in just 30 seconds, Jane's father, who was watching out the window, tipped her off. "Look, Jane, here he comes now. Santa Claus." I never heard a child squeal or clap her hands so much. "Oh, it's Santa Claus! It's Santa Claus! It's Santa Claus!" Jane babbled over and over again in that high, choked voice of pure happiness, and the family chimed in too. It really got me for an instant. Jim Allen, than whom nobody on earth and maybe in heaven too loves the sound of his own voice better, almost ruined the whole effect with his big trap by pontificating. Now Santa Claus is approaching so fast you'd almost think he was flying. We're even excited ourselves here in the control room as we watch that big red truck zoom over the hill and down the snowy road. Now it's turning into the yard. It's a thrilling sight, really thrilling. You'd have thought he was reporting a sports event. But he couldn't steal the show, no matter how much he loused it up. There was too much honest-to-goodness drama going on in that living room. You could hear everything. The door opening, the whistle of the storm, and boy, it was really a blizzard. You could almost feel the cold rush in before the door closed. "Merry Christmas, everybody," Santa Claus boomed, and I mean boomed. Jane promptly burst out crying, and the father and mother both said, "Merry Christmas, Santa Claus," while the mother added, so softly that few listeners caught it, "God bless you." I can't understand it, but for once Jim Allen decided to keep his yap shut. He didn't utter a word while Santa spoke to Jane. "Don't cry, Jane. This is no time to be sad. This is the happiest night in the year. Dry your tears and look at the wonderful presents I've brought you. A doll, a beautiful, beautiful doll." "I wasn't crying because I'm sad, but because I'm glad," Jane protested, as her sniffles quickly ceased. "Oh, what a beautiful doll." Well, Jim had to horn in again. "The doll is very lifelike," he gloated. "Its eyes open and shut, and it has two expressions, a great big smile and a sad, sad frown." He should have been an auctioneer. "And here's some pretty nighties for you," Santa Claus continued. "Pink and white and lavender, and trimmed with lace and ribbons, and a pair of lovely red slippers, and a royal blue robe." That set Jane off crying again worse than ever, and even Jim Allen, who seldom recognizes drama unless it's spelled out to him in capital letters, knew enough to keep still. "Nighties," Jane was sobbing. "Slippers, robe, they're just what I want, Santa Claus. Because I'm in bed almost all the time. I can't walk, Santa Claus. I can't walk again ever." All I could think of just then was that the ghouls who had thought up this show must really be having a swell time for themselves listening. Santa Claus cut right in with the punch announcement. "Oh, yes, you can walk again, Jane. And very soon, too. Next week your father and mother are going to take you to the hospital, and a very nice man is going to do something to your back that will make you all well again. And here is a piece of paper, Santa's own personal check. You know what a check is, don't you, Jane? That will pay for everything. So there's no reason to cry any more at all, is there, Jane?" And of course Jim Allen had to flap his tonsils some more and explain about the check and the Santa Claus Indiana bank. Jane was still sobbing, but it was the happy kind, all mixed up with incoherent words of gratitude. The father said soberly, "We can't thank you enough for this, Santa Claus. It means everything in the world to Jane." And once again the mother whispered, "God bless you." They were a wonderful couple. Then Santa started to leave. He was very businesslike about it, too. No dawdling or mushiness of the sort I expected from Donovan. Without hurrying, but also like a man with plenty of other business to attend to, and not any too much time, he said briskly, "Well, Jane, I have lots of other boys and girls to visit tonight. I must be getting along. So goodbye, and the best of everything in life for you, for many, many happy years, for as long as God wills that you live." It sounded screwy to me, not the sort of thing Donovan would say. Jane seemed to sense a strange finality in that farewell, too, for she pleaded, almost panic-stricken, "Won't I see you again next year, Santa? Aren't you coming back again, ever?" Santa Claus only said, very gently, "Well, Jane, I don't know. If you need me enough, and if you have enough faith." And he smiled reassuringly. It was completely screwy. None of that mawkish tripe about being a good little girl. None of that rigmarole at all. Just need and faith. I thought Donovan must have decided to commit professional suicide, but good. The door opened, letting in the sound of the storm again, and closed. Santa was gone. Everybody in the living room started talking at once, and the talk and gasps and sobs and laughter coming over were really heartwarming at that. Then Jim Allen cut in, still unctuous but urgent. "Something's gone wrong here," he announced portentously. "Santa Claus's watch must have been running ahead of ours. The schedule called for him to remain another 3 minutes, but as we all know, he's already left. His explanation should be interesting. Probably he'll phone in from the village any minute now. In the meantime, we'll just go on listening to Happy Jane and her family in the living room." Well, we listened another 15 seconds, maybe, while Jane's folks were putting her presents over under the tree, and then we got the surprise of our lives. Another red truck rolled into the driveway, and a second Santa walked into that living room. It was a ticklish situation. Who was this guy, anyway? What would he say? Did he even know we were on the air? The mother's nerves, strained to the limit by the ordeal she'd already undergone, just let go. She went off into hysterical laughter mingled with racking sobs. The father whispered to her fiercely, "Get a hold of yourself. We're still on the radio, do you understand? I don't know who this fellow is, but he could be Art Phelps. He's about Art's size." And Jim Allen, of course, licked his chops and orated, "Well, well, well, what have we here? A second Santa has showed up, no doubt someone from the village. Here's drama nobody expected. Who is he? As soon as we find out, we'll let you know. Ah, this would warm the heart of old Scrooge himself." Santa Claus, too, was a showman all right. "Ho, ho, ho," he bellowed jovially. "If it isn't good little Jane herself. Here's Santa Claus with lots of wonderful presents for you, Jane, because you've been such a good little girl all year." There was an instant's silence. Then Jane said defiantly, "You're not the real Santa Claus. You're just a great big fake. That's just an old false face you've got on. I can see the string behind your ears." "Ho, ho, ho," Santa Two boomed. "Don't you worry about string behind my ears. I'm the real Santa Claus, all right." and Jim Allen was sounding off hurriedly. Aha! The mystery is solved, folks. This Santa Claus who just came in is our Santa. He just held up a card on which he'd printed, delayed, skidded into ditch. So the other Santa was the man from town. Is that clear? Ah, isn't it wonderful that the neighbors, too, remembered Jane, even sent their Santa here ahead of ours? What an inspiration, what a coincidence. Santa, too, was working fast, because the half hour had almost run out. He yanked from his pack a huge doll, some frilly and costly nighties, a robe, pretty little slippers, and a big check signed Santa Claus, and drawn on that bank in Santa Claus, Indiana. Now, get this straight. I am not a superstitious man. But as I watched and listened to these goings-on, the weirdest chill ran up my spine. You know how you feel when you're in the presence of something you can't understand? Well, that's the way I felt. For present, our Santa was giving Jane the exact duplicates of each and every gift she had just received from the unknown stranger. The very lifelike doll, with its eyes that opened and shut, and its two expressions, the great big smile and the sad, sad frown. The pink and white and lavender nighties, trimmed with lace and ribbons. The lovely red slippers, the royal blue robe. And the check. It was the exact duplicate of the other, down to the tiniest detail of color and design of the paper, and the highly individual flourishes in the hand-inscribed signature. Remember, our check had been made to order. No even remotely similar check had ever existed before. Every gift was not only similar, it was identical. But that was impossible. Coincidence or deliberate intention either just couldn't stretch that far. My gaze swiveled toward the resplendent tree in the corner of the living room, and I swear the short hairs on the back of my neck rose. I watched the rest of the show mechanically. It was completely disrupted. Anything might happen. Jane was the most self-possessed of all. She just sat looking down quietly at all the lovely things Donovan had piled in her arms and saying gently, "Thank you, Mr. Santa Claus, but you should take back all these nice things and give them to some other little girl who needs them, because I don't need them now. The real Santa Claus just gave me the very same presents not 2 minutes ago." I liked the way she emphasized the real Santa Claus. Jim Allen's majestic baritone was in there pitching too. What a surprise! What a marvelous surprise! 2 Santas instead of 1. Isn't that terrific? We've just been reliably informed that the first Santa was a local personage named Art Phelps, and that his gifts represent the combined contributions of all the residents of this little village, young and old, rich and poor alike. It's wonderful, just wonderful. Well, it was getting into the final minute, so Jim added hurriedly, "And now our time is running short, so I'll just signal everybody in the living room to join in singing 'Hark the Herald Angels Sing,' and we'll put on a record and just let everybody sing along with it, in 20 million homes all over America and everywhere this program is being heard. All join in, everybody, and the happiest Merry Christmas to Jane and her family, and to both Santas, and to you all." So the engineer started the recording, and everybody sang. And it was all very confused and loud and joyous and inspiring right up until the program went off the air. I never heard so much real happiness packed into the punch finish of a radio broadcast in my life. But after it was over, there were some things that needed explaining. The first Santa's gifts had disappeared, vanished completely, without leaving a trace. That's what had given me the shock as I'd looked over under the tree for them. They just weren't there anymore. We milled around that living room for a while looking for them, but I think everybody knew in his heart then that they wouldn't be found. Then we went out on the porch and down into the driveway, where we clustered around the red truck. "Holy Mother of Mercy," Donovan whispered. "Do you notice that there's only the tracks of my truck and my footprints? Nobody else's?" After a minute, his breath white in the bitter cold, Jim Allen asked querulously, "Well, you met this other guy on your way up here, didn't you, Donovan?" Donovan shook his head. "I met nobody. There wasn't a car on the road all the way out. You had to pass him. Alan insisted doggedly. "There's no other road." Donovan merely pointed to the road, with its blanket of fresh snow unbroken, save for the marks of his truck. No one spoke as we went back into the house. Jane was asleep in her wheelchair, a smile crinkling the corners of her mouth, the doll cradled in her chubby arms. She didn't awaken as her father wheeled her out into the hall, her mother trailing silently after. They both smiled wistful apology as they went out, and we nodded understandingly. "Well," Jim Allen said grimly as the door closed behind them, "there's an awful lot about this broadcast we'll always have to keep our trap shut about. I, for one, don't want to land in Bellevue psychopathic ward. Was it a hoax or what?" We were all surprised when the engineer spoke, for he was ordinarily such a silent man. A saturnine, lean-jawed Scotsman with deep-sunk, brooding eyes, he was a type you'd know believed in nothing except the evidence of his own senses and the analysis of his own reason. Yet this practiced man said quietly, "Somehow it reminds me of those visions of St. George, fighting at the head of phantom armies. Thousands of soldiers saw them because, through some sort of mass faith, they expected to see them. Something like that must have happened here tonight. 20 million people, including all of us here now, expected Santa Claus to come riding over that hill in a red truck at an exact split minute. And so he came, the wish fulfillment of all of us." He paused reflectively, then went on. "It struck us as incredible that the presents were exactly like those Donovan brought later, but didn't they have to be? Remember, we all knew just what presents Donovan would bring. And of course, after Donovan arrived and we began to wonder, the presents vanished. The spell was broken. Yet, who knows if they would not have remained real had we kept our faith." "Good grief!" Jim Allen exclaimed incredulously. "You believe that?" The Scotsman looked him square in the eye. "I believe that," he said simply. "And I also believe that, if Jane ever again needs Santa enough and has faith enough, the same Santa who was here tonight will come back to her, as real and true as anything that exists in the universe. You see, Alan, he was the real Santa Claus. He was a creation of the mind and of the spirit, the only reality there is, and the only attribute we have in common with God. And that, I think, is the only satisfactory explanation we shall ever have of the other Santa." If you enjoyed listening today, be sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting the red subscribe button below. After doing so, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button to receive new content notifications. If you'd like to support our work and receive exclusive perks, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. To support us in other ways, see the video description for links to our Bandcamp and Patreon pages, our merch store over at Teespring, and further information relating to our releases on Audible, iTunes, and Spotify. And until next time,